Hello class, this is your Professor Attorney Alfredo Mayol III. Today our topic is all about the Family Code of the Philippines. So before we begin, let me read to you my favorite Bible verse. So this will serve as our prayer. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely, goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Okay. So, like what I said earlier, class, our topic is all about the family code of the Philippines. So the basis of our discussion is the book of Rabuya. Okay? So this is a reviewer. This will help you see the overview of the family code of the Philippines. And by the way, class, this reviewer I have downloaded this from the internet. This is not mine. I think the author of this reviewer is Abyssamis Austin Joyce. Okay, I'm just using her notes in order to discuss the overview of the family code. Because the book she is using is also the book that I was reading before I took the bar exam, the book of Rabuya. Okay, so without further ado, let's begin. Family Code of the Philippines. Okay, using the book of Rabuya as a reference. So this code took effect on August 3, 1988. Title 1, Marriage, Chapter 1. What are the requisites of marriage? So under Article 1 of the Family Code, marriage is more than a contract because once executed, a relation between the parties is created which they cannot change. So marriage, class, is permanent in character under the law. It is a sacred contract. It is not like other contract that you can breach. Okay? So in the Philippine setting, when you enter into marriage, then it has a character of permanency. It has a character of sacredness, of sanctity. Okay? So unlike marriage, other contracts may be modified, restricted, or enlarged, or entirely released upon the consent of the parties. So, compared to other contracts under the law, marriage contract is somewhat in a higher degree. Okay? What are the sample contracts? For example, the contract of employment. Okay? You can change the stipulations in that contract depending on the consent of the parties. But in marriage, it is permanent, it is sacred, and in the eyes of God, it is forever. Okay? Always put that in your mind and heart. So, marriage between rapist and the raped person. So, this is a case analysis. So, subsequent valid marriage between the offender and offended party extinguishes the criminal action or penalty imposed. Okay? Because even though rape is a crime against the chastity, okay, against a person, so the subsequent marriage of the rapist and the rape victim will extinguish the criminal, civil, and if there are administrative liability, okay, it will extinguish all those liabilities. Because like what I said earlier, though it is a crime, the nature of the crime is like personal in character. So it is by way of exception that the subsequent marriage will extinguish the liabilities. So if the legal husband is the offender, subsequent forgiveness by the wife as offended party shall extinguish the criminal action or penalty, but not if the marriage is void ab initio. So, likewise, class, in the Philippine settings, even though you are married to each other, okay, you are living as a husband and wife, so your partner, the male partner, can still commit rape with her spouse, okay? By way of jurisprudence or case law, Supreme Court said that if the spouse or if the wife will not give its consent, okay, or if the husband abuses or use force in order to have carnal knowledge with his wife, then the husband can be a case for rape can be filed against the husband. Okay, so be careful. Next is marriage creates a social status or relation between contracting parties in which the state is also interested. So, property relations. Once a male and female enter into a contract of marriage, they will have a property regime, okay? There are many types of property regime, but the most common is the community property. So, by community property, it means that the husband and wife has equal sharing, okay? To all properties, monies, real or personal. It is in law, they are considered to be of equal sharing, 50-50. So Article 2, Section 12 of the Constitution provides that state recognizes the Filipino family as the foundation of the nation. Okay? Under the Constitution also, Article 15, Section 2, lawful marriage does not shed the spouse's integrity or their privacy as individuals. Okay? That is why a husband can still commit the crime of rape against the wife. Next, legislative regulation of marriage must not contravene the mandates of the Constitution. Okay? So, the Constitution is the most basic law, the fundamental law of the land. So, any statute or law which is against the Constitution, then it is deemed void. Okay? It's deemed illegal. Next is marriage settlement must be within the limits of the family code. Okay? So, like what I said earlier, there are regimes of property once you enter into a contract of marriage. So basically, if you have no prenuptial agreement, okay, an agreement that defines your property regime, then for all intents and purposes, the law will treat your property regime as community property. Okay? So, to determine validity of marriage, to be tested by the law enforced at the time of marriage was contracted. Okay? So, the Family Code of the Philippines is a new law. Okay? Even though it was made August 3, 1988. Okay? Because in the Philippines, there are still other laws that has effect on the marriage, the settlement of marriage, the property regime. Okay, there are still other laws which affects those issue. Okay, for example, the old civil code, and now there is a new civil code of the Philippines. Okay, so nature of marriage already celebrated cannot be changed by a subsequent amendment to the law. Okay? So if the time of your marriage, the property regime is, for example, conjugal property, by conjugal property, so it means that if your share is 75%, then when the marriage is dissolved, your share should be 75% also. And the remaining will be the share of your spouse. However, due to the amendment, okay, due to the effectivity of the Family Code, by law, it is deemed that the sharing is equal, okay, 50-50. Next is Article 2 to Article 3. These articles illustrates the requisites of marriage, okay? So what are the requisites of marriage? First is essential and formal requisites, okay? So by essential, it means that the parties are legally capacitated to marry each other, okay? They are of legal age, they must be male and female, okay? Next is they must have consent, okay? Next, authority of the solemnizing officer, okay? So the solemnizing officer, for example, a priest, a judge, a mayor, they must have authority under the law that they can solemnize marriages. Next is valid marriage license, okay? So, when you apply for a valid marriage license, there are also requisites that you need to comply. Next is the marriage ceremony. So, Article 2 is the essential requisites. The two essential requisites for marriage are legal capacity, okay? So, by legal capacity, it means that the spouse, okay, the male or female has no impediment to marry the other party, okay? So, what are the impediments under the law? For example, if the male was already married, okay, before a subsequent marriage. So it means that the subsequent marriage was illegal, okay? Case for bigamy can be filed against the spouse because there was an impediment before the subsequent marriage. Next, essential requisite is the consent, okay? So, consent must be freely given in order for the marriage to have that certain validity. So, for example, if the other party there was a shotgun marriage, okay? By shotgun marriage, it means consent was vitiated. There was force, there was intimidation, okay? that affects consent of the other party. Next, Article 3 is the formal requisites. So the formal requisites are authority of the solemnizing officer, valid marriage license, and a marriage ceremony. So, three components of legal capacity. So, our discussion here, class, is just an overview, okay? Because the family code is very long and the time constraint, there is time constraint in our discussion because we are only given 4 hours to discuss the family code. And not just the provisions of the family code, but also jurisprudence or case laws. So I have uploaded the notes, okay, the family code of the Philippines, this reviewer, and case laws, okay, jurisprudence to the files, okay, in Teams. So for reference, while I discuss class, just open it, and then from time to time, you can read it, and then you can review it later or in another time, okay? So, let's continue.